So you're looking for a mirrorless camera with all the new technology, but you don't want to spend more than $1,000. This is 2025's best mirrorless cameras under $1,000. Coming in at number 10, we have the Canon RP. It is a full-frame 26.2 megapixel camera. It's one of the first offerings in the mirrorless lineup from Canon, and it's going to take really good photos. Now, if you're looking for video features, this isn't going to quite get you there. It's an 8-bit 420, and there's no C-Log on it. But from a photo standpoint, this is still a pretty well-respected camera. It's not going to have quite as good of low light and no noise as newer cameras, but it will provide really great photos, and in fact, a lot of landscape photographers will still run this one. Now, Canon has some legendary skin tone color science. They're known to have some of the best skin tones on the market, and this does have really good dynamic range for how old it is. Now, as far as the video features go on this, it is only going to shoot 4K 25. It's not going to have C-Log, and it is going to be 8-bit 420. So if you're looking to do some intense color grading or anything like that, this might not be the camera for you. But if you're looking to just shoot some basic video and get great photos out of it, I wouldn't look any elsewhere. This is going to come in at $899 in the used market, and typically I like to go to MPB for this kind of stuff. Coming in at number 9 is the Sony a6400. It's a 24.2 megapixel APS-C camera, and it is going to have a little bit better video offerings than the Canon RP. So it's going to offer things like S-Log. That is only 8-bit, but it will give you a little bit more malleability with the video editing. And as far as the images out of this thing, I don't think they could get much better from a $748 camera. Now, one of the great things with the a6400, because it is an APS-C size sensor, is you can get lenses fairly cheap for it, and it's open to third parties. So Sigma, Tamron, Viltrox, there's a wide variety of lenses out there that you can get on the cheap that are still very high quality. Coming in at number 8 is going to be from a company that is really close to my heart, mainly because I use one of their cameras to shoot my daily life. And that is going to be the FujiFilm X-T30 Mark II. Now, the X-T30 Mark II is going to have similar color science to what you're seeing right now. We're shooting on a FujiFilm XS-20. It will give you the notable Fujifilm film simulations that you can get great straight out of camera images and not have to really edit them at all if you don't want to. Now, the Fujifilm X-T30 Mark II is also an APS-C sensor. It's 26.2 megapixels, and that means you're going to get the lenses fairly cheap, and they're also open to Viltrox, TT Artisan, Sigma, and Tamron. So great lens selection out there on top of the really good Fujifilm first-party lenses. Now, my personal favorite thing about the Fujifilms is just the way that the images look out of them. The Fujifilm film simulations are awesome. They give you a lot of editability inside the camera, and their sensors just tend to look really good. Now, for video features, you're going to get 4K 30 on this, and it does come with F-Log, but only 8-bit internal recording. Moving down the list to number 7, we're going to have the first offering from Lumix, and that's going to be the original Lumix S5. Now, you can pick up one of these original Lumix S5s for around $990, and it is going to be more of a video-forward camera, whereas the other ones were photo-forward. So it's going to offer 4K 60, great image stabilization, 422 color space, and V-Log. Now, one of the big downsides to this camera is it is only contrast detect autofocus, so it's going to struggle a little bit more than things like the Sony and the Canon when it comes to autofocusing. And I forgot to mention, this is a full-frame camera. So it's 24 megapixels. That is going to increase the cost of your lenses a little bit, but it's also going to increase the dynamic range of the camera. Coming in at number 6 is a Nikon Z5, and for just under $1,000 you get a full-frame 24 megapixel sensor. It is going to have contrast and phase detect autofocus, although it's not going to be quite as good as Sony or Canon's. They did not do their upgrade quite yet when this camera released. There's no N-Log or 10-bit 422 on this, but it is going to have 4K 30 with a pretty hefty crop, a 1.7 times crop factor when you're in the 4K 30 mode. Now the Z5 does have 5-axis in-body image stabilization and Nikon's legendary color science, which I think is the big shining point with this camera. Nikon colors look really beautiful, and if you're shooting wildlife or landscape, I would err towards this camera. Coming in at number 5 is Canon's R50. Now this is one of Canon's newer offerings as far as their budget-friendly cameras go. It is going to have adaptability to the EF mount with the Canon EF to RF adapter, and it's a 24.2 megapixel APS-C sensor. I would say this is one of the best value budget cameras that there is, and you get a lot of features with this. So it does have a 4K sensor downsampled from 6K, and that's going to be uncropped, which is a huge deal. Not only that, but it does offer 12 and 15 frames per second in the mechanical shutter mode. So if you're looking to get into sports or a little bit faster paced stuff, this might not be a bad idea. Now for my video shooters out there, it doesn't have a log format, but it does have HDRPQ, which will increase your dynamic range quite a bit. And if you're looking to do a little bit of content creation, it also has a close-up mode where it will grab focus on products instead of trying to track your face if you bring something into the frame. Now, before we go any further, if you could, like and subscribe. It really helps the channel grow, and we're getting close to being able to monetize here on YouTube. Now, for the money, you're getting $579 on this Canon R50, and with what it has to offer at that price point, I don't think there's many things that can touch it. And coming in at number 4, just under $1,000, and the second Sony on our list, it's going to be the A6600. Now this is a 24.2 megapixel crop sensor camera. It will offer S-Log, although it's not a full 10-bit codec. Shoots in 4K 30, and it's going to have a great look for photos. Now I know a lot of people that shoot on the A6600 and they have no intentions of upgrading from it. Especially if you're not a video shooter, if you're a photo forward shooter, the Sony A6600 has a lot of great offerings, and it does give you some malleability with your editing. These tend to do really well in low light and have good contrast and dynamic range. For my sports or wildlife shooters out there, it does offer 11 frames per second, and your big upgrade from the A6400 is that you're going to get IBIS with this. And I think, as always, one of Sony's most notable features is their autofocus. They're the industry leader when it comes to autofocus right now, and pretty much have left every other camera company in the dust when it comes to autofocus. Breaking into our top 3 is a new offering from Nikon in the Z50 Mark II. This is a crop sensor 20 megapixel camera, and it's going to have very good video features as far as 4K 60 and 1080p 120. So for my slow-mo footage out there, you can actually get slow-mo footage out of this. And I think this is one of the only cameras on this list that's fully going to offer that. Another notable feature is that this is one of the only cameras that's going to offer N-Log and 10-bit 422 color space. So a lot of editability in your video footage. Nikon has taken a page out of FujiFilm's book and is now offering 31 picture profiles that you can edit and make look your own style as well. Now this camera is also going to offer 11 frames per second shooting and advanced contrast and phase detect autofocus that can track up to 9 subjects. So Nikon is bringing up their levels of autofocus, and I don't think anyone's going to be disappointed with what this camera has to offer. The price point on this is going to come right above $900, but still below that $1,000 threshold. One of the most feature-packed cameras on this list. At number 2, we have another Fujifilm, and my personal choice on this list, the Fujifilm XM5. It is a 26.1 megapixel APS-C sensor, so it will have the great lens offerings that we talked about before. It's an X-Trans 4 CMOS sensor. Now, it's not as new of a sensor as what's on the XS-20 that we're shooting on right now, but it does offer a lot of the same features. Now, the JPEGs out of Fujifilms are beautiful, and shooting in JPEGs, it's going to offer you 30 frames per second. One of the downsides of this camera is that it doesn't have in-body image stabilization, but there are a little bit of workarounds with that, such as a gimbal if you're shooting video, or optical stabilization on the lenses that you're shooting. And pretty much most camera lens companies are going to offer that at this point. This does have Fujifilm's latest AI-based subject detection and 425 autofocusing points. Those will be contrast and phase detect as well. 10-bit 422 internal recording, and I think the biggest thing that this camera offers is 6.2K open gate. So open gate's going to utilize the full height and width of the camera sensor. That's going to give you a lot more data with your video footage and will give you a full readout. Now, as stated before, this would be my choice out of all the cameras on this list. It's tiny, it's pocketable, and it's super powerful, and it comes in right at $799. Now, before we get to number one, I want to give my honorable mention. It is another Canon, it's a crop sensor, and it is a 24.2 megapixel crop sensor. That is the Canon R10. Now, we have this camera's big brother, the R7, and I love the images out of it. It does pretty well up to 6400 ISO. You can grab this camera for $879, and for the most part, this is kind of a wildlife photographer's dream. It has really solid hybrid autofocus, dual pixel AF. There's not C-Log on it, but it does do 10-bit and 422. It's just in a HDR PQ format. The main thing with this is that it's going to offer super high frame rates. I think it's up to 40 frames per second, and that's 14 frames per second in the mechanical shutter. So for wildlife, for sports, I don't think this camera can be beat out of all the other ones on the list. This would be my choice if I was shooting those particular things. And drum roll please, for number one, we have another Sony. The Sony ZV-E10 Mark II. Now this camera just came out pretty recently, within like the last 6 months or so. I think this is the best feature pack camera on this list, and it does come in right under $1,000, but I think you're getting what you pay for with this camera. Now this will be a little bit more of a video-centric camera, but it's still going to take really good photos as well. It offers 4K 60, and that's downsampled from 5.6K, so great image quality out of it. It has a ton of codecs, S-Log3, S-Cinetone, and S-Gamut, so huge with video files, how much editing you can do with this. The dynamic range is great on it, the image quality is great on it, and it has Sony's newer color science, which I think is slightly better than the old look that they used to have out of cameras like the A6400. I think this is just the best camera on the list. On top of that, you're going to see a directional capsule mic, it has tally lights, it does 11 frames per second, and it has in-body image stabilization. Of course, this is an APS-C size sensor, so you can utilize the cheaper lenses, and there's a ton of offerings for that. It's also just the best bang for the buck. So in my opinion, the ZV-E10 Mark II is probably best for people that want to shoot video and photo. You could even get into a little bit of professional work with this thing. It has good in-body image stabilization. It has wonderful autofocus, as we stated before, up to 729 autofocusing points. Those are phase and contrast detect as well. And I just think it has a lot of good features on it. So if you're looking for a new camera, which if you're watching this video, I would imagine you are, let me know down below which one you're thinking about picking up. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask. I'd love to answer them for you. For that, we'll catch you on the next time. Thanks for stopping by. We'll see you later.